Start because we have a lot of stuff to do today. And so the first thing I'd like to say is that next week we're going to work with two different artists, with two artists that are different, Degas and Angra. So Degas, Degas, Angra, Ingres. Ingres. So what I'd like you to do for next week is to select two images of either one of those artists or two images of both the artists, but two in total. Two, in other words, two of Degas, that's your two, or two Degas Ingres, that's your two, or two Ingres. And write 10 or 20 lines about why you selected these. So what I envision is that next week I would do an introduction to those two, tell you something about the two of them, why they're important, what you should be keyed up about when you look at them. And then the same as we did with Lopez, we'll just listen to your input in the second half of next week and the week after. Someone had a question, I think Francis here had a question about the upcoming holiday, Passover, which is, I think, the week of the 29th. I am okay with either way that you want to go on this. It's not, our class is in the middle of the week. It's not kind of close to the time that people celebrate this. But if there's a few people who do celebrate and want to not have class, then I'm okay with that. So what do you feel? Francis, do you want to say something?
No, I'm fine with meeting, but I know some people go away for the week often, so.
Does anyone feel that they're not going to be here?
No.
I would prefer to just keep going. So if that's okay with you, I mean, we could almost, you could have a little something to eat while you do the class. I could start off by asking you 4 questions. You could recline to the side. Be the same thing. It's the same idea. It's a dinner with people you like, talking about things that you think are important.
Seder would have to be a dinner with people you don't like.
Rita, we met a woman in Italy who is from like mainline Philadelphia, and she became a very good friend of Renee's. And for the longest time, she didn't understand what Seder was. So she thought Seder was S-A-T-Y-R.
Oh, that would
S-A-T-Y-R.
yes.
And she also didn't understand anything about Woody Allen. But she actually might have been right. Considering all things considered, she might have been right. Okay, so before we go on to your response to the film, hello? Oh.
Yeah, we're still here.
Okay, before we go on to your response to the film, just wait Sasha, just wait. Oh, you could start here. I wanted to add something about Lopez that I thought of since last week. So if you want to mix this into your brew, this is what I thought to add. There's something in his work that I find very appealing, and it's about unknowability. Unknowability. The lack of certainty. I also like the obsessive quality that he has. A singular quest not connected with rhetoric or a cause. A singular quest not connected with rhetoric or a cause. Wonder as opposed to certitude. Wonder as opposed to certitude. So that's my little introduction. And I would like to start listening to your take on the film. And I would like you to hang out a little bit after the class for like 5 or 10 minutes. And I would like to add something, but I don't think it's makes sense to do this while the class is on. Oh, I just forgot. Sasha, could you show the first slide? Okay, so this is, I found 2 pictures which I thought that you should see before we go on to the discussion of the film. This is a drawing of Maria Moreno. And I think the drawing is dazzling, and the light, the whole fluorescence of this is remarkable, really remarkable. And okay, and the second one? And this is a work of the artist Daniel Quintero. I have not seen both of these, the drawing or the painting. The painting is quite large. It's about 7 to 8 inches high. It looks to me like this reproduction is slightly dark, but I always wanted to see this painting. This seems to me to be like incredibly haunting and evocative. And I'd love to see this in person. I think this is in a museum that is in Scandinavia. And the artist is Daniel Quintero, Quintero. It was somewhat difficult to find this picture. And a year or 2 ago, I went through a search. I was kind of obsessed with finding this. I went through a search and found it. And it seemed to me worth showing. And that's all I have to say. So in terms of the, let's go on to the discussion of the film. And I'm going to call on people willy-nilly in terms of this. And I wonder if we could start with Len. I hope you're not put on the spot.
No,
that's
fine.
I'm glad, really.
There does seem to be some background noise, though. If someone, there's some talking in the background.
Oh, yeah, please.
On some
radio.
The people here who are tuned in, we don't have, we have the microphone on. So you should be cool with the extra noise.
You make the TV a little lower.
What? Say it again.
No, I was just shouting to have the TV lowered in the other
Oh,
room.
thanks.
In
Great.
case it was me.
Rita, thanks. Len.
4 years ago, I broke through the warm earth and stretched a shoot to the sky. I tasted sunlight for the first time. In my first and second years, I came to know my home, a small courtyard, and my family, a man, his wife, and children. There is also a dog and a lemon tree. I grew taller in my first and second years as the seasons changed, but I remained an adolescent. I bore no fruit. Late in my second year, the man, Antonio, set up an easel by my side and began to paint me. We spent many hours together. He regarded me with great affection, and we enjoyed each other's companionship. In my third year, my body began to change. I stored additional energy in the spring and bore fruit for the first time in autumn. Antonio set up his easel again. How I delighted in his company, especially on days when the sun was bright and we enjoyed its beauty and warmth together. Now it is my fourth year, and I have awaited Antonio's return. I have longed to be near him. To my delight, he has come to paint me again. After meticulous preparation, he starts. He calls my fruit lovely and sings to me softly. We both delight in the warmth of the sun. A heavy rain sets in, and I feel Antonio become restless. He continues working, now under cover of a protective shelter, but we both long for sunlight. Its absence makes us weary. One day, a man and a woman come to meet me. The man asks Antonio, "Why do you not paint from a photograph?" Antonio replies that being close to me is what is important to him, and I feel joy. Over the next month, Antonio continues to spend time with me until one day a heaviness consumes my body and one of my fruits falls to the ground. Antonio picks it up and appreciates its fragrance with his nose, but something in the air has changed. The weather grows colder. Antonio now wears an overcoat and scarf, but continues to sketch me with great care, until one day, to my surprise, he reaches out and plucks a fruit, then several more from my branches. I know the painting is over. I am saddened as he dismantles his poles and strings and engages the workers to move the shelter to the lemon tree. The weeks pass, and my remaining fruit falls to the ground. Antonio no longer visits me. Under cover of night, I dream. In my dream, I am in a different courtyard in another town. I see Antonio. He is not a man, but a young boy. He returns my gaze, and I shiver with joy, but my fruit grows heavy and falls to the ground. I wake with the same fruit rotting at the base of my trunk. The night is cool, and I miss Antonio. Winter passes, and I am quiet and still, but my solitude is not filled with sorrow. It is filled with waiting. I am rewarded when spring arrives. Small shoots of grass appear at my base. They swarm and overwhelm the black, desiccated fruit. Intense sunlight shines on me, warming my leaves and trunk, coaxing new buds of fruit from my branches. I know Antonio may soon rejoin me, and I am happy.
Lovely.
Len,
Bravo.
Bravo.
Off the charts.
Awesome.
Off the charts. Off the charts. Superb.
Bravo.
Thank you. Thank you. Really.
Thank you.
So how about Jim?
I was hoping you wouldn't call on me because that's a really hard act to follow.
I know, but you can do it. You can do it.
I was praying. I was praying. So some of my observations are there's a theme of dualities through the movie, light and dark, dry and wet, nature and art. And these dualities are take place against the passage of time. So time is passing, and we have these dualities taking place. I love some of the things that Lopez says in the film. He doesn't say all that much. He says the best part is being close to the tree. He also says you always have to give something up. Yeah, I can't do a proper encore for Len.
Oh, that's fine. You've done very well. You've done very
Okay.
well. More?
Nope.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Someone said, and I don't know if this was Antonio or not, how can such a small tree bear so much fruit?
Yes.
Yeah, isn't that good? There's a life and death thing also, of course, and it has to do with the life and death, not so much of the tree, but of the fruit. So we see the fruit first appearing and blossoming into its full luxuriousness, and then starting to decay as the seasons pass, and the fruit looks more and more decadent, if a fruit can look decadent, and finally falls from the tree. And at that point, the fruit is gnarled and withered. And it's kind of reminded me of, it's a whole life cycle. I mean, that's kind of what happens with every creature on earth, right?
Yeah.
Animals, people, fruit. So so I thought that was very good.
Thank you. What
Thank
about Mark?
Well, again, I think I'm in the same boat of having trouble following after Len, and I think this is going to be the story for the class. But
It'll be interesting to hear the musical follow. A musical follow. I was not in cahoots with. I just picked him out of a hat.
Somehow I have my doubts, but
no, really, truly. You know why I picked him? Because I thought he seemed like the kind of person who could go first. But if I knew what he wrote, I would have picked him last. Okay. But he looked like the kind of person who a lot of people don't want to be the first one. So I thought of him. I thought he'd be good to be the first one. My mistake.
He was right. You were right.
No, you were right. You were absolutely right.
Mark, you go.
Give me one moment. Sorry, I'm pulling up my comments. The thing that I was struck by in the movie, of course, it's a tremendous movie. It's so terribly long, and yet there is something about it how I think in watching the movie from a retrospective point of view, I've only watched it once, but if I had to watch it a second time, there would be something very regretful about the first, I would say, 10 to 15 minutes. And that regret stems from the fact that it's the one day out of the whole movie that Lopez has alone, without any interruption, without any
very, very well said.
And the thing that struck me in contrast to that day is there's the conversation with his friend who is visiting. I wrote the name down somewhere. I can't find it right now. Um, and the friend says something to the effect of, he talks about studying in Paris, and he says, I I couldn't understand all the middle-aged artists in Paris, but now as I'm older, I understand it, that they have this fervent intensity and they work all the time. And I'm working all the time. And he says this while having spent the whole day
Talk.
talking to Lopez.
Right, that's right.
And drinking and eating chocolate and cookies. And
Yeah.
he spends half
Point.
an hour,
Good point.
So, but at the same time, Lopez is painting. He's agreeing with him, but he's painting at the same time. And he's going, oh, yeah, and, he half turns and then paints and half turns and paints. And you look at that and you almost pity him in this moment, because you know that he's not going to finish it.
Hmm.
And you know that he's still having to live life. He's having to figure out the size of his shoes and try on the new jacket. And he's talking to somebody who's visiting, talking to his best friend from school. And there's something very sad about the moment when he takes the painting after it's been rained on and he leaves it in the basement. And that, to me, that moment was absolutely heartbreaking. And you see him draw after that, but it's not the same. You see him try again, but you know it's not the same. You know that if he had been able to do it on the first day, that's the only chance he had.
Could I ask you something, Mark? Is there a musical analog to this film, or a performance analog?
I hadn't thought about that, but for some reason, off the top of my head, I immediately thought of the Mozart Requiem, which is a piece that he never finished on his own and was finished for him. There are several different versions because of that. And sometimes it's just not even performed with those editions. There's similar pieces like that. There's the Mahler 10th Symphony. There's the Schubert Unfinished. There are a few pieces like that, few monumental end-of-life pieces. But the Lopez is different because for him, it's not the end of his life.
But I meant this in a slightly different way. What I meant it is, you're a performer. Is there a point where you are beginning to look at something to perform it? No one has seen you. It's your first impression. You're just completely open to the composer, to the musical experience of it. You're completely open to, what are you going to do? Is that connective in any way?
I mean, I suppose it's different in the sense of it being a performative art form. I suppose that the difference would lie more in the performance than in the preparatory aspect, but the difference being that once you begin a performance, there is no turning back. It's something that we have to, as music teachers, really impress upon our students, that you can take all of the time in the world before you begin that first note. You should breathe. A little kid will run in and immediately sit down and boom, and they might hit a wrong note, and the moment is gone, and you have to teach them, no, breathe before you begin. because once you begin,
Mm.
that's it. And it's this really terrifying threshold to cross over that threshold, and we cross over that threshold constantly every time we get on stage,
Mm.
and we
Mm.
have to get comfortable with that. And I suppose Lopez has to get comfortable with that threshold
Yeah.
as well.
I'd like to come back to this a little later. I have another question for you. Can we go on, or do you have
Absolutely.
something pressed
No,
to
no,
say?
no, no.
Okay. So what about Eva?
Who, me?
Yes, you. You.
Well, it's obvious that I cannot follow up on all of this, especially
You
Mr.
just do your thing. Do your thing. That's
well,
all.
I wrote it down because, anyway, I wrote, as a TV and documentary producer, I would have been fired had I dared create a film that moves as slowly as this one.
That's very good. That's very
I
good.
loved it.
Yeah.
I'm used to switching pretty fast between segments and images, the aim being not to bore the viewer. But here, Victor Erice boldly created an unconventional experience almost in real time, and it was not boring. It's a relaxed, somewhat distant, yet quite intimate look at the act of creation. It's sort of spying on Antonio Lopez as he, with obsessive precision, paints the Queen's tree and tries to capture the light that illuminates it. I was surprised when he stopped the first painting and started another. It was interesting to learn, as he says, that for him there are no preliminary sketches, that the painting itself is the sketch. Yet he cannot capture the elusive light on the tree, which reminds me that I started a project myself 2 years ago and I didn't finish it and don't think I ever will. Another film, but so I felt like him. Anyway, I also saw the film as a meditation on the passage of time, in a sense, with the morning light at the start and the evening light later on. The birth of a painting, though it's not completed, and the tree itself a living element as its fruit ripens and later on rots on the ground. A highlight for me was the portrait session when Lopez poses for his wife's painting. It was such an honest, real life moment when he ends up falling asleep and she quietly accepts it and leaves the room. This is a film that has to be viewed more than once, as it's so nuanced and in its quiet exploration has a lot to say. Also, he sings some flamenco songs while he works, which I know, so I can sing along with him again next time I view it. That's it.
Okay. Carmen.
Myself.
You okay, Carmen?
Yes, no, I'm fine. I just had to unmute myself. So two points I wanted to make, and the first one is this is almost like a piece of art within a piece of art, and I was just sort of looking at both in the same way. And the first thing that struck me was the theme of it, and in a way, the filmmaker was very lucky. El sol del membrillo, the sun in this fruit called membrillo, is a great subject because membrillo is a fascinating fruit. It actually originated in Persia. It went all the way to Spain. It's very perfumed and it's very beautiful, but it's not something you can eat. It's actually very bitter. And when you see the workmen later on and you see them being attracted and they're picking it up and then they're peeling it, and it's almost like, and they're foreigners because you can tell they're not speaking in Spanish, and they're trying to like it. So that little tidbit is fascinating. But also the thing about the membrillo is a very beautiful fruit, and it became a divine fruit. It was associated with Aphrodite and then with Venus. And then there was this slight link in the film in that the friend who went with him to Bellas Artes, to the art school, they're reminiscing about their old teachers and all that. And they also talk about how they used to sketch Roman busts, Grecian busts. And remember when we were drawing Venus and this and all that. So there was that little link there. So I found that the theme of the membrillo a very lucky, serendipitous coincidence for both artists, the painter and the filmmaker. And the other little bit, totally unrelated, is that there's that moment at the beginning of the film when you see Lopez Garcia looking at the tree and thinking what he's going to do. And there's a moment when you see his eyes, they're looking beyond. And it reminded me of this article I read about the power to visualize, which I actually, people take it for granted, but not everybody's born that way. The power to imagine what is not there. And many artists have it, many don't. I actually learned it's something that a plumber can have, or a carpenter, and that many engineers don't have it, but it's just something you're born with. And in that moment, in those first minute of the film, you actually want to see it through his eyes. There's that moment when he's like staring at it. So that was, one other point. That was it.
Yeah, terrific, terrific. I'd like to get back to something you said, but I want to include as many people as possible. What about Lucia?
Simon, I have to start by saying, forgive me for I have sinned. I didn't.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
I only, unfortunately, got through about 60% of it. But I do have some thoughts, and I intend to finish it. It's a documentary, but I thought that as opposed to regular documentaries, it had very moving private moments, such as his daughters standing in front of the painting, discussing it at the very beginning when he was just starting it out. And the workers, same thing, they were in front of the painting commenting, which was kind of like the cinematographer was just spying on them. And then when Maria was doing her work, it really channeled into exactly what she was doing, which was, I think, fascinating because it was so minutely not described, but the imagery of it was very personal. The fact that he tried on shoes and then they were too small. I mean, there were so many private moments. The workers who were learning Spanish, it was just phenomenal. It really touched my heartstrings to see this just getting down to everyday life. Beyond that, the artistic input that the creative process is so involved. It was a fascinating thing to observe that he is intensely dedicated with the little white paint lines that he puts on the fruit and on the leaves, how he's watching the sun come down at the beginning and then the whole thing turns to rain, and it just his work ethic and the process of creating that piece of art, it's fantastic. It's fantastic to watch. And as an interesting tidbit, I actually looked up the artwork of the artist who was his friend who came to visit, because he was describing how he was doing the portrait of a woman who was, I don't know, he was describing her as a subject for his portrait. So I wanted to see his art, and it was completely different than what the realism of Lopez is. So you can't really see anything, but it's very powerful. The art, I think, is very good and powerful. It's just a completely different take on oil paintings and art in general. So that's about it. I have to finish the movie, but it's fantastic. It is slow. I mean, the pace is like you're almost watching paint dry, but it's absolutely fascinating. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of it. Also, interestingly enough, my second painting that I was going to talk about was Marie and embajadores. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And I thought that there was a mistake with her, the spelling of her name, because her name is Maria. And on the painting, actually, he wrote Maria right under her face there. But I saw in this movie that everybody calls her Marie. So then I figured out why the name on the painting and the title of the painting are different and the A is missing.
Yeah, I think one of the daughters is the subject of the drawing.
Of Maria and Embajadores, but it's an oil painting. It's the one that has a door ajar and a woman looking.
Oh,
at
yes,
the door.
that's the wife. I'm pretty sure that's the
Yeah,
wife.
that looks like
Yeah.
the wife with the
Yeah.
two planes. Yeah.
Yeah, and she's the I don't know if I said this, but this is the woman who did the drawing that I showed.
Right, Maria Moreno.
Yeah,
His wife.
yeah.
Right.
Let's see. What about Francis Babb? Did you see the film, Francis? I can't hear you. You have to unmute your. You have to unmute.
I was touching the symbol, but it wasn't. I'm like Lucia. I'm a bit of a sinner. I saw most of the film, but I had some thoughts on what I did see. And it struck me that it was sort of like looking at an artist, that the way the film was constructed, that it was, there's a film called 8½" by Fellini, where he's doing a film about his life and you're not really sure which is his life and which isn't. As I was looking at it, I was struck by how some of the events seemed to be staged. When he brought the canvas down into the basement, the camera had to be in the basement looking up. Was that arranged? Did he ask Lopez Garcia to come down with this at that moment? Did he know the camera would be there? How much of the conversation was really real? Lopez is looking at a fruit tree, yet he's painting the fruit. He's putting marks on it, so it becomes artificial also. Maybe that's his technique for capturing the light. So there was the levels of artificiality, what's real, what's not real. So I felt like it was a film within a film, and some of the shots of just the pause, where the film would pause, where it was very slow. There was beautiful lighting, just of common objects that were around. There's one scene where they cut to the sunlight in the sky, and the form of his head or his hands and the whole shape looks just like the sunlight sky. So that had to be staged. The filmmaker had to find the light. He had to wait for the light also. That would be perfect to edit it in. So I felt like it was an art within an art, and also seeing how meticulous that artists really were. So that's what I got out of it.
Good. Thanks. What about Francis Stern?
Both unmute myself and open my notes that I have here. But I do want to respond to what other Francis you were just saying, because I was very aware of that in making the film. And I was thinking when Mark said that he was alone in the beginning, he isn't. He's got these people, at least one person, maybe more than one, filming him. And so I wondered if having his friend there and bringing the radio was more a way to sort of be in his own space and more ignore some of the time his being filmed, while, having these people watching him. But what I wrote, just fragments of phrases: patience and fortitude and focus. Apologies to the Lions, but that's what struck me the most, was his patience, fortitude, and focus in it. There's a sincerity in his work. Being with the tree while painting it is more important than the result to him. And his feeling for the tree, an active part of the painting. Len, what you said much better than I. The film has no narrative voice. It's just showing showing what's happening. We don't know what the people are building in this studio building. We see a doorway, but that wouldn't take as long as the time they're doing. We don't really know. There's no overall sense of what's going on there in contrast to his work. And there's the couple that comes in to discuss his work. He's obviously a translator, but are they collectors, gallery owners? Who are they that they're having this discussion with him? And also the suits who show up and go with him and Marie somewhere. Their discussion about it is, at first they talk as if they're people who don't know art, almost making fun of it, and then they talk about it in artistic terms. But with Enrique, a very touching picture of him as a youngster, because he's 7 years younger than Enrique, and he was, as he said, he went straight to the boarding house. He didn't go hang out in the cafes that the others were doing. But he comes across as a very sweet person. It's relaxed the way his children speak with him, that his daughters go shopping for him. He doesn't, I thought that was very touching. He's probably like me, hates going shopping, and kids do it for you. And then the sun and cloud shots made me think of, and someone tell me if this would have been the 60s or the 70s. I used to go to anthology film archives and watch Russian films, and they always represented time passing with wind in the fields and shots of the clouds. And it just reminded me of those, that they were always the same way they did it. Last part is that it was interesting to me to see his technique, creating the horizontal and then the plumb line, his shaved pencil using a ruler, calipers, his interest in symmetry, keeping track of the sagging of the fruit, the relative positions of the leaves and the branches. And yet his work doesn't feel at all mechanical. His work,
well said, very well said.
very warm. And I have a question to ask. What technique, what is she doing under that magnifying glass? I see the design of it, that she's working on leaves, maybe a similar kind of thing, but what, she's scratching into something?
I think it's an engraving. I think it's an engraving, a very small engraving of leaves.
Mhm.
That's what I think. Francis, and for everyone else, the director of the film, Victor Erice, E-R-I-C-E, he did another film which I think is quite stunning. If you don't know this film, this is available. It's called Spirit of the Beehive. Spirit of the Beehive. And the thing in the Spirit of the Beehive and in this film is that the light in the film looks like the light in Lopez's painting. It's a very dry, naturalistic light. It's not lit up. In other words, it really depends on the time of day. And very close valued grays, kind of smoky light.
Yeah.
Francis, do you have more to say or enough? Okay. What about Kathy?
Okay. I'm just going to read what I wrote. As we watch, the main subject of the film is Antonio Lopez preparing to work on his painting of the quinces. As he measures, cuts, and frames his canvas in the studio, it appears this is a house he and his wife Maria may have recently purchased and is being renovated by several workmen. Besides his work on the canvas, we are drawn in by the subtle lighting that seems to be in every scene. From the moment Antonio was at his table inside the house, there's a torso of a woman to his right that is lit ever so artistically. Of course, light is what Antonio was all about in making this painting. He and his wife Maria talk about it and how beautiful the light makes the fruit. He measures the fruit, the leaves, and how they change from day to day. I'm not sure exactly what he's seeing every time. I'm assuming he's adjusting to the movement of his subject. Watching him work so lovingly on this painting was calming to me. People spoke with him, visited him. His daughters came in and out and took time to try on a jacket and a pair of shoes they bought for him. Always there was a gentleness and a concern in his interactions with other characters. Then he's back to work, intently focused, even when holding a conversation with his friend and fellow painter, Enrique. We get to share this quiet intimacy of these two men, sharing a quiet moment between friends. The moment when he and Maria are preparing the canvas with the stone squares is lit only from a brash floor lamp. As Maria turns it off, they both go to the window, and we see a silhouette of them highlighted only by either a street light or the moon. Whatever it is, it's almost Hitchcockian, and it was a lovely moment. Later, he picks up the fruit from the ground and smells it and then replaces it. I love the overall mood of the film, the quiet, the peacefulness, and the lovingness. When he's thinking, what's he thinking when he's looking and smelling at the fruit when he removes it from the tree? Then he and the workmen dismantle the canopy that is protecting it from the weather. Antonio picks up his easel. The workmen come with a wheelbarrow and he takes a piece of the fruit. The brick wall is completed. We are now indoors with Antonio. Then we're outside with his daughters taking the remainder of the fruit. Antonio studies the drawing. The workman cleans the fruit he's taken in and shares it with his friends. Once again, the subtlety of the lighting adds to the moment. Maria helps Antonio dress into an overcoat. He lies on the bed. She aims a floor lamp on him and adjusts the pillow, and she arranges him as she would like him to be. And then we see her go to her canvas and lights the painting of the man in the bed that she's working on. Maybe she should start over, he says. Maybe she should, she says. That's what I got out of it.
Good, very good. Rita?
Yes. Well, first of all, how lovely. No assassins, no serial killers, no space odyssey. Just an artistically wrought film about making art despite life's mutability, and maybe because of life's mutability. Life's mutability is central. The quince tree grows, fruit ripens, decays, then the tree flowers once again. The seasons change, family and friends grow older, the yellow-green goes brown. The sun is a constant, but the sunlight is an elusive, ever-changing muse. Freeze any frame of the film at random, and you will see the director as artist, who frames each scene so carefully that a frame could be one of Lopez's paintings.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Each frame is in the spirit of Lopez. The film has a serenity, a slow, steady tempo as it portrays in a very unpretentious and respectful way the minutiae of the creative process that an art lover, such as the rest of us, does not often see. The necessary and tedious precision of the artisan, the critique and support of family and friends, not just the canvas, paint, and easel and brush, but also the construction nails, the razors, the glue, and string that are art's underpinnings. Beyond the minutiae, of course, there is a guiding principle. Perhaps the word fuller, F-U-L-L-E-R, which is the word Lopez's art teacher used to critique his early artistic efforts. In a charming philosophical moment, Lopez admits that he really didn't understand what that meant way back then, but now he does. He's learned how to access the depth and richness within him, to create, and also to gracefully accept the creative disappointments that come with it, the fullness of the artistic process.
Beautiful, really beautiful, very well written.
Thank you.
What about Stella?
Yeah, so I agree with a lot of what I've been hearing, especially like with the lighting, how that managed to perfectly line up with a lot of what he was interested in, focused in throughout the whole thing. And this could just be like, you know, freshman art school, but most of the artist documentaries that they show us are really like focused on presenting them for a gallery, like making their work sound wonderful, only showing like finished things, making the artist sound like flawless. So one that having like the chance to watch a documentary that's so much more honest about like process, where you
Very
see
well
someone,
said. Very well said.
yeah,
Very
where like
well
you see
said.
someone who's so driven, but also like doesn't quite feel like they're making the progress they want to. So I found that all very refreshing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
More?
and then as a piece, I really enjoyed like the isolation is a big thing in the work itself, and I think that that carried across into the movie really well, because there's these moments of like very empty spaces or like solo shots of him like painting alone, and like the lighting and everything just screams like isolated, and then there's these very small kind of moments of community, but then those are quickly switched back into the isolated kind of scene, and that just makes it more dramatic when it flips back. But yeah, the amount of focus on like detail, lighting, like small, insignificant, but like the pieces that sell the realism are like the smallest pieces. And that's what the documentary was so focused on showing so well. But yeah, I really appreciated it.
Could I ask you a question?
Mhm.
So sometimes when I see an exhibit that I really respond to, it's very inspiring to me. So it makes me get all pumped up and energized. And would that be something that happened in terms of watching this film for you?
I mean, it's not a film that's very energetic, but I do like
No,
really.
I understand that, but it's a different kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I adore a lot of the art that comes out of it, and just like seeing the slow process. Like on the one hand, working like that is a little bit maddening, but on the other hand, I really like watching it, and I think it did, you know, influence me.
For those of you who are near New York or in New York, I saw an exhibit that gave me this feeling of being super inspired. And this is an exhibit at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It's the exhibit of prints and drawings of Goya. And this exhibit is absolutely stunning. It's just a not to be missed show. Many, many prints and drawings, each one about maybe 5 or 6 or 7 inches. Explosive. So highest recommendation. But let's continue with you. Efrat, would you go?
Oh, wow. Okay. Hi, everyone. I just joined a little late.
Are you okay, or should I choose someone else? Should I?
Oh, I'll dive right in. I didn't get a chance to write anything, but I did really enjoy the film. I thought it was, it felt very familiar to me, especially the beginning scenes of Lopez, you know, preparing his canvas and being alone. It really, it's been a while since I've like had that feeling in any kind of artwork where I look at it and I say, oh, I feel like someone really understands me. So that definitely was the case there. And I had Sasha and I talked about the film quite a bit. And one of the things that stood out to me and was actually something that came up when I was first starting my studio practice was the number of people who kind of interrupted Lopez as he was working. And well, Sasha and I were not in agreement about whether this was a good thing or not. And maybe we don't need to judge, but it was interesting because I was thinking like, he really just wants to be with the tree, but he keeps making space for other people to be a part of the work with him. And then I was wondering, well, did he like not meet his goal of painting the tree and completing that painting because he had made time for so many other people. So I guess it was a little bit of an existential artist question around what to value and how to continue making the work. Yeah, so that was something that I thought a lot about throughout the whole movie, because he meets so many different people and brings them into his work. And even the people who are like inspecting it, I don't know if it was gallerist or a critic or something like that, who comes in near the end to show other people and to explain to them about the work. And maybe he was with an artist as well, because the other person was commenting on what they would have done. So I thought that was kind of interesting, the cast of characters surrounding the artist making the work.
Thank you. Thank you. Anita?
Hi, everyone. Let me just find my notes. I felt as though it was blending reality and the imagination. There was accuracy and precision, and it seemed like subjectivity. It was also protecting, it felt like it was protecting the sanctity of the quince tree, its own evolution, while retaining the accuracy of the painted reality, marking the changes to know how time is affecting the truth of the painted story, and acknowledging change and transformation while protecting the specificity of the work that's being created. I felt as though it was a real life of a still life. You know, it was, that's what he was doing. We were there. We were really participating in the minutia. In fact, when I was watching it, I kept on wishing that the camera would move in different angles. I wanted to study his strokes and see what he was doing on the canvas, or just see some of the expressions on his face. So that frustrated me a little bit, I felt. But I really enjoyed it, and it really made me wonder about what was really transpiring. There was the question of urgency of getting as much work done as possible, because they were older now. They were reminiscing about when they were younger. And the painting that his wife did of him in the bed was very disturbing to me. And I just wondered if anybody else had that as an issue. And the clothing that had been purchased. There are questions in my mind that left me uneasy with that. But there was a wonderful loving feeling there. So that was an inspirational aspect of it. And I also, excuse me, really appreciated Carmen's information on the quince, because when I was a very young girl, we had a quince tree in our backyard, and the quince, there were many hanging from the limbs, but we weren't allowed to pick them. So we had to wait and wait and wait until the perfect moment had come where they could be picked and they could then be made into the jam. And it was such a long period of time. And it was interesting having to experience it through this movie and recollect my own experiences of 4-year-old, waiting for the day when the quince could be picked, and the deliciousness of that fruit and the history. So that was really great. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. What about Cynthia?
So I loved listening to all of you. I adore this movie. I saw it twice, and I've seen The Spirit of the Beehive too. I happen to have, years ago seen it. And with Simon, I urge you to see it too. And it was so long ago that I saw it that what I remember most about it is the light. and that also there were several things going on at once. It was the setting, of course, out in it's during Franco's time, and the two little sisters who are the subject of the film have heard the story about Frankenstein. And so they have conflated Franco and Frankenstein. And they have this whole, imaginary life around that. Anyway, so Erice is capable of a lot of things at once. And he's, Simon is collaborating. This is a collaboration film, Simon, Erice. And then I was struck by, it's like a time lapse of a still life. I mean, it's the tension between time and still life. There's quite a stillness about this film for the most part, but also the tree is like a body, and the body is never completely still. And he loves this body. The film seemed like almost like a love poem. In a poem, every word counts, and there's nothing out of, that doesn't belong there.
Very well said. Very well said.
And I felt that everything that's in his, in his work, but also in this film about his work, belonged there. Even those distracting other people who come by. It's marvelous how he's able to, focus on the work in his own still way, but every single, all the ones that I can think of in this kind of intimate film, they all shed light on him and his work too, his family, the way, his bang, 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 planting his feet in front of this tree.
Right.
The friend, Enrique, who comes and reminisces about their days in, art school, but they sing a song. And you hear him singing too as he's painting. I love that. A lot of noise in the film, actually. Sounds, I should say, not bang bang, but sound. So it's not a silent film at all. Though it could have been about a painter, could have been a completely silent film. This one is not. Enrique sing this song that they remember, and it's a love song. And they don't quite get it right the first time, and they don't quite get it right the second time, but then they sing it again, and they feel that they've got it as well as they're going to. So, I mean, there was some humor in the film. Of course, his family sheds light on him, and their care for him is for them. The Chinese, the people who come, I thought that was fascinating. I don't know Spanish very well enough to know what she was, or Chinese for sure, what she was asking, but she did a lot of gesturing and try, to appreciate the painting. And then after that is when he is frustrated by the, rain and so on. And he takes up a different piece of board to make this branch that comes across like this. And I thought, I wonder if he had, a Chinese ink painting in his mind of, the quince tree, they have them there too, a plum tree, but it's starting from what do you call the structure underneath something?
Armature.
The armature, exactly. The armature of the tree. So he's kind of getting down to that basic thing. And, it's not the same as the tree, but it is what he can do. And he could even do it inside after a while. So the other thing is the last part, but it's implied in the whole film about the cycle of life. And it's implied in any painting of a tree, with fruit, especially. And I think of fruit and his children who are his fruit, you know, he and his wife's fruit. By the way, I have seen the two heads of his children, those big, enormous heads outside the Museum of Fine Arts that just welcome you. And every time there's a round-faced child in one of his paintings, I think, oh, that's the little girl or something like that. Anyway, so the intimacy of the film was very striking to me. And that last part that you were also talking about, where it's the end of the day, it's the end of this film, it's the end of this foray into painting this particular, not that he's not going to come back to it, because he probably is. You know, the rotting fruit, disintegrating fruit, and then the spring will come. And his artist wife, who undertakes to paint this portrait of him as a figure in an overcoat, lying horizontally, you know, horizontals and verticals are so important to him, lying horizontally on this day bed, falling asleep. And I had remembered earlier in the film, the friend was talking about some pose in a picture that was kind of like this, like almost saintly. And that comes back at the end of the film where he's lying on this daybed, having fallen asleep, the faceted crystal that he's been holding in his hand drops to the floor like one of the quinces dropping from the tree, and his wife gently, you know, lovingly places it back, kind of where his heart is, inside his coat, I guess it is. And that's, you know, well, the film is over at that point, and I thought it was a wonderful way to end it, especially when you think about the beginning and all the preparation that he puts into it. That isn't boring at all, but it isn't particularly figurative. The stuff at the end is so figurative and like, you know, like a poem coming to a head. Anyway, that's I thought it was a love poem. So I don't know, his other work has struck me as being, you know, very urban and, you know, out there. And this is very in his little walled garden with his little beloved tree. And I'm going to stop.
Thank you. Let's see, Sasha.
Hey, so in the canon of movies about painters, at the top of the list is Andrei Rublev. I'd actually been rewatching it a few weeks back, as I like to do pretty often. To me, it's like a great record, or more aptly, a great piece of art that I like to return to. The film, which someone else mentioned a few weeks back, takes place in Russia in the 15th century and is unlike any other movie ever made, until I saw this movie. The slowness of many of the moments in The Quince Tree is perhaps unintentionally copied here. But slowness is also seen in Lopez's method of working as well. Looking is as important as action. One major difference in these two movies, though, is that Andrei Rublev has almost zero painting in the whole movie, and The Quince Tree has so much footage of the act of painting. As a painter myself, I really enjoyed in The Quince Tree the scenes of canvas stretching, preparing paper, and the other moments of craft in the film. It was also wonderful to see inside his studio, the quiet moments of objects and their assigned spaces all around the studio. And seeing Lopez's outdoor setup was also nice to see. Painting outside, even if it's right outside your front door, can be such an ordeal. But once you get your setup going, it becomes part of your process. You set up every day the same way a chef does, or a chef might, the mise en place of being a painter. The film overall made me feel grateful for being able to relate to so much of Lopez's life.
Great. Thank you. Rob?
Nice.
Yeah. So I'm going to read a piece, and
Somewhere around 550 BC, the Greek pre-Socratic philosopher Heraclitus instructed his students that no man can step into the same river twice, because it is not the same river and he is not the same man. This is the same problem that Antonio Lopez in the film The Quint's Son is dealing with. From October to December in 1990, Lopez attempts to capture the essence of two quince trees in his backyard. To control this subject over this time span, he uses a plumb line to create a true right angle for his work. He arranges two poles attached to a string to set the frame of the scene. He measures the midpoint of the string so that the tree will be in the exact center of the work. He marks the midpoint of the branches and the leaves in order to account for their changes over time. And finally, he nails guides into the ground to position his feet to always ensure that he has the same perspective to the work. Yet, as October gives way to November and later December, the sunlight changes, the weather changes, the roof ripens, grows older, changes hue, develops spots, gets heavier, and sinks lower as the branches bend to accommodate its weight. To counter this, Lopez uses his painted lines to document the structural changes of position, but it cannot capture the October fruit that as it appears in late November. These painted lines stand in the same relationship to the original scene that a musical score stands to an original musical performance.
Terrific, beautiful.
Before electronic recording, the only way to experience music was to witness the performance in the moment as it was performed. These painted white notations are sort of like ghost-like notations of the branches and the leaves, but they can only indicate the changes in the subject since last October. But Lopez, of course, is aware of this seeming contradiction. When his relatives suggest that he could capture the same hue of the October quince by continuing the painting next year, the artist responds that both the leaves and the fruit would be different. When the Chinese couple point out that many artists would feel comfortable working from a photo, he responds that the best part is being near the tree, and that is more important than the end result. Perhaps for Lopez, this is the key to his work, his process of coming to grips with the spatiality and the changing subject matter in this film. And perhaps not just the film, but perhaps the way he approaches his art is more of a performance art than we're led to believe. I guess I could end with Heraclitus again saying, no man steps into the same river twice.
Well said, well said. Beautiful, beautiful.
That's great.
Eileen?
Oh, okay. Wow. I feel a little dumbstruck right now. I really, really, really love the film.
Had you seen it before?
No,
No.
I haven't.
Okay.
I did watch it over, maybe the first third of it over a few times as I was having trouble with getting the English subtitles to hang around. But I really loved it. And it was perfect for me to watch this weekend after I had my second COVID shot. And I was starting to feel really feverish and achy and not all there. So I was in a dream state watching green screen of a film. For like 2 days, I was like floating with it. But I wrote some things about it. The opening credits, the rosebud sled in the flames. I know what that was for Citizen Kane, but was there any similarity in this film? The loss of innocence, loss of childhood, beginning of adult life, onward to the end. So I'm not sure if the rosebud was the logo of the director, or was that really put there in relation to the film?
That's a good question.
Yeah, and if anyone knows, I'd like to know.
Yeah, very good, very good.
And the opening, as I was watching it, it reminded me of Frederick Wiseman's documentary, National Gallery, where the museum is opened in the morning very slowly. I don't know if you're familiar with Wiseman's documentaries, but they're filmed in a similar way where the camera is on. There's no real script or maybe a little bit of staging, but the camera just goes. And I've seen a lot of his films. I actually stayed in a movie theater for 3 hours seeing National Gallery, which is the National Gallery in England, I think. I recommend it. It's really great. So it did remind me a bit of his work. And I wrote many similarities in the technique of filming between the two directors. Camera is always there and filming. No comments, no commentary, and no explanation of anything. I think there might have been some scripted areas, but also improvisation too. There's a whole tradition in the documentary genre where the interface between what's scripted, performed, and observed is blurred. Towards the end of the film, the scene with the Polish worker peeling and then sharing the fruit with his co-workers is from this vantage point, staged. I also really love the exchanges with Antonio and his tall fellow painter, especially when the latter is sitting on that small kid-sized chair. Surreal and dreamlike. It did remind me also of early Buñuel films, especially The Andalusian Dog, and also reminded me of the dreamscapes of Terrence Malick films. The scene of him lying on bed, fully dressed in a dark suit with shoes, a final portrait by his wife, a death scene perhaps, similar to the tree in its final flourish. And I have to tell you, when he didn't respond to her on the bed, I thought he had died. And that was going to be part of the film. It was really, it was very shocking. And there was a lot written about the film that I could have copied, but I did copy a bit, but I'm not even going to read it now. I think I've said enough. I really enjoyed it.
That's great. That's great. Perfect. Let me see. Roxana.
Okay. Making sure I'm not. Can you hear me?
Yes. I
All
saw
right. I was thinking you weren't going to
I saw you before.
I was like, he's not going to call me because he knows I watched the film with him.
I saw
and
you.
He's going to blow me off again like last week.
No.
All right. So I'm going to try and cover things that weren't covered, which isn't very much. But I paint, but I don't do notations or markings. You might remember when I was in your class, I just kind of winged it. I never made the little notations, which the fact that he was that in depth. was I felt like he was kind of, in some way, Stella mentioned process art. It was very much a process, very deliberate, very much showing him like he's breathing. This is an act of him taking in air, chewing food. This is just part of who he is. And the people in his life understand that. So like whether it's purchasing the clothes or showing up and having a conversation while he's working. And what I was thinking about is his and we didn't write about this the last time, or at least if we did, I missed it. We just just watched it.
Yeah.
So this is my second viewing. The lushness of the quince tree and some of the fruit in the garden, juxtaposed to like a very plain dirt floor. It's like that dirt floor of his garden was a studio floor. It was a canvas. He didn't have to worry about anything. I thought that was kind of amazing as an artist, that how he set things up and thought about things. And someone mentioned sound. I believe it was I don't know if it was Anita or Cynthia mentioned sound. The dogs barking, whether it was his dog or his neighbor's dog, the airplanes going overhead. It was very middle class, banal, regular people neighborhood. When I first saw it, I thought this is his studio, but he might live there sometimes.
Very well said.
Yeah, maybe he lives, maybe that's his home, but his studio's in there. So hold on, I just dropped my notes. The other thing is, I think Cynthia brought up camera angles, which Born When I Was Born and being in high school when MTV, the fast cutting and editing of everything we watch now and expect to see now. It was very much like Jim Jarmusch films in the 80s and 90s, where one camera angle and it stays there and it forces the viewer to watch from that angle. So I was annoyed by it the first viewing, and by the second viewing, I relaxed into it and took a breath. And I'm glad that was 5 years ago. This is now. I'm a little older. So it made a difference.
It sounds like you're responding to Rob.
Yes. And also the painting at the end, when I first saw it, I also thought, oh no, that's not a documentary. They don't die at the end of documentary films. But it was kind of the process of a death mask, even though he's holding up a prism. And in symbolist art, a prism usually means the different facets of your life. So he's holding up a prism. And I follow Edward Povey, this symbolist artist, and it's like when he uses it, it's about the facets of your life and the different pieces. So I thought that was very interesting. And also what caught me, being of the generation I'm from, I grew up with television, the blue light of the TV sets. Now it would be cell phones and people doing this, or computer screens, but it kept coming back to the metro, the sound of the metro, the sound of the airplanes, the sound of the dogs barking. And then it kept showing the blue light of, while he's painting or thinking, or while they're processing their art, this is what's happening around him. And I just thought, also the way the night sky was. But I'm trying to pick up on anything I can find that people haven't talked about. And there's not very much people haven't talked about. So I think that's, and this is also important, at least maybe only to me, but my sister lived in Spain and taught English from 1990 to 92. And in August of 90, I was in Spain, and I was there till October. So when this was being filmed, I was there. And I did go to see some of the work of the painter, representational painters of Spain at that time with her. And also I didn't get to talk about her, but I did write something on Amalia Avia in relation to the fact that I lived there at that time. And I was going by those places at that time. So it meant a lot to me.
Okay, great. I think, Dean, you're the last one then. Is there someone else besides Dean? Okay, so Dean.
Okay. Well, besides the fact that everything's been said, I'm blown away and by all the insights. Being from kind of far away from the art centers, maybe. There's a couple of things, maybe just a few notes. I thought this was a lot about waiting, about trying to slow time down, in the inevitability of mortality, just really trying to drink in life, in the sense, where for him being with the tree, as others have said so eloquently about, that was more important to him. And the fact that art isn't really about art. I think this is trying to connect people to, people that are not artists, to maybe the meaning of work in general. I come from a family that my parents have done, they work together all the time, which I kind of like that connection, kind of my mom and dad are a husband and wife team. And I like to see that family interaction in the movie, but they do very blue collar work. For years, they stripped woodwork that had been painted in the 50s, and these beautiful homes with beautiful woodwork that had been covered up. And they would spend months upon months of meticulous work uncovering that woodwork, doing these wood mantles with dental picks, taking off these flakes of paint and revealing the beauty of the wood underneath. And it's meaningful to my parents. It really gave them pride. They got paid very little for it, but the pride they get, and I think the dignity that it gives them, and that people have it. People think they're very maybe quirky or just a strange couple, but they're very loved, and it gives their life so much meaning that they are willing to spend time with things that they feel are beautiful. I did watch an interview with the movie maker Victor Erice, from a film festival, and one thing he mentioned a couple of things. He liked Chaplin, in movies by Chaplin.
Was this an interview in Spanish or English?
It had subtitles, but it was in Spanish.
Oh.
Yeah, but it had subtitles.
Can you send me the link to that?
I'd love to. Yeah, it was excellent. And he said he met the artist because he saw him painting large scale, scenes, cityscapes. And what caught his ear was that I can't believe I'm blanking. Anyway, the artist had a recurring dream that he mentioned to him that was of a quince tree. And it wasn't just a dream he had once. It's a dream they had over and over and over again.
This is the dream that ends the film? The dream that ends the film?
Perhaps. That's kind of what I thought after I watched the interview, that may be what this, the point of putting that at the end, the sleeping, is that maybe, and that the reason Erice wanted to do the film is to try to understand what the meaning of that is, because he feels that of all dreams, recurring dreams have some sort of meaning behind them. Yeah. And he thought maybe that this taking on this enormous project, which was a huge project to take on, would bring out the meaning of what that was, of what that recurring dream was. That was kind of interesting. And let's see what else. I was thinking regarding the this. I loved the scene with the painting looking at, was it the Sistine Chapel scene? Mm-hmm. oh, that really touched me because, you know, he was talking about all the guilt he saw in the painting. And then they looked at the bust of the Greek god, the woman, and the life and just the contrasting visions of what, you know, the radiant youth in the bust and the guilt and the kind of decay and pain that he saw in this in the other painting. And so I was thinking maybe, you know, one of the drawings his uncle showed him was of a bust. You know, his uncle was taught that method of how to render these marble busts in, you know, academic statues with this radiance. And he wanted to know how to capture that in art. And it seems to me that it's almost a religion for him. And placing that tree in the middle of the painting, it's almost like a religious icon or something. And he wants to somehow show that life and maybe that the just sort of seeing and being kind of resonating with each other. And the other thing about just, I guess, the movie maker I thought was interesting too. He mentioned the Lumieres, the Lumiere brothers that made the first, I guess, one of the first films. They did a documentary called I think it was called The Exit of the Factory Workers, something like that. But Arethe mentioned that it was a documentary, but the boundary between fiction and documentary is pretty blurry, he said, because there's several different takes of that and of the Lumiere brothers, and it's timed differently. One they exit slower, one they exit faster. And so he said, yes, this is a documentary, but it is, but it isn't. And there's also one other film that I watched, which was a film, I think it was in a series that filmmakers were invited to submit. They had to be 10 minutes or less. And I think they're all related to time. And if you can find that film, it's also very interesting. It's no words. It's just documents a countryside, and it features a baby and the community that come together. The baby has some sort of little bit of something wrong, you might say, at the beginning, and it's a beautiful movie that captures, I don't know, life silently, but it's beautiful.
Dean, could you send me a link to that one too?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you need to send me two.
Okay, all right. Yeah, the interview and the movie.
How about one more thing, and then I would like to finish. Cynthia.
Oh yeah. Yep.
I'm just reminded from what Dean's talking about, that first, and I think Eileen said this too, that first image of the rosebud in flames, and then the last image of, it looked almost like Mickey Mouse, but those that light, that artificial light that's on his wife painting him. And it's, now that I think about it, it seems like, you know, this is a movie, this is a film, which is also about light. And so the parallels are abounding, but thank you, Dean, for the Lumiere brothers. What other word? I mean,
well, actually to reiterate what Cynthia is saying, for instance, in the sculpture, I think that Carmen talked about with his wife near a wall, and then there's a baby on the wall, and then there's a couple in another room. You almost have the feeling that it is like a documentary, but it's what you talked about, which is the difference between fiction and documentary. It's so naturalistic, but it's not. It's like a dream.
Yeah. Yeah.
Say one more thing, and then let me. Yeah. I don't want this to go on too long.
Yeah. The last thing would be that in the book of drawings I have, there's a really nice drawing he did of Antonio dead, which is an echo, and so I think he didn't shy away.
Very
from
well
drawing people, drawing death, and I think he found a sort of beauty in it somehow, or an urgency or a meaning that we are mortal, and that, you know, there is an urgency to life.
Yeah. Let me, Sasha, could you put that image of my triptych on? The next one. Okay, so I wanted to say something to sort of end this segment. And so this part, I wonder about including this because it's really, it's something about myself, but it is also in its own way about Lopez. But I just, I'm of two minds about it, but I'm going to go with it. And I hope you find it interesting, but it actually does connect with Lopez. When I saw the exhibit of Lopez's work, which I had described to you, I saw it at this gallery in Manhattan called Stemfley Gallery. The gallery was located on Madison Avenue and 77th Street. And as I explained, I saw it because of an article that was in the newspaper, which showed a picture of, I think, Lopez's wife sleeping. And I described all that and about how synchronicity and coincidence appears in life if you know how to wait and listen, or if you are open to that. So I didn't mention that I had never been to that gallery before. And after this exhibit, I had never been to that gallery after. So there's a reason for that, which is that that gallery was not a gallery that was particularly well known for showing the work of figurative or representational artists. So I did not know the gallery. So when I went there, it was the first time I'd ever been there. And I was completely struck, as I tried to mention. So the second thing I'd like to say about this period of time for me is that this maybe sounds loony or nutty or crazy. I have an idea of the way I want my work to be shown, or the way I thought my career would go, which is that I was, this might sound funny, but I was not particularly interested in selling the art. I was more interested in a point of view that the art had, a philosophy or insight or some vision or poetry. And so many artists, you know, they're kind of driven by making a living and selling the work and all that. And everyone is different. So that's the way it is. Everyone's different. But that was my thought process. So maybe in 1972, my daughter was born. And in 1973, I was working on this painting. And the middle panel was 3/4 finished, or 2/3 or 3/4 finished. The left panel was white with it drawn out. The right panel was white with everything drawn out. And I had a studio then at 4th Avenue and between 24th and 25th Street in Sunset Park. And I shared the studio with a sculptor. And for a variety of reasons, I could not continue with the studio I was really like, didn't have any income. And my daughter was very little, and I couldn't figure out what to do in order to be able to work on this painting. This is a very large painting. It's about 14 feet wide. And you have to be a little loony to work on something like this. So anyway, I was really worked up, obsessive. Many of the adjectives I used to describe Lopez, you could use to describe this. And so I thought, gee, this is a good time to try to find maybe someone who can sell my work or represent me, but I tried to put this off as long as possible. So I remembered the exhibit that I had seen of Antonio Lopez Garcia at that gallery. And I wasn't super aware of how difficult it would be to meet someone who would represent me. I was slightly aware of it, but I wasn't overriding, but I was aware of it would be difficult. Anyway, I took some photographs, maybe about 10 or 20 photographs, and a photograph of this picture in progress. And I went up to that gallery, the same gallery that I'd seen the exhibit of Lopez, to this very fancy location at 77th Street and Madison Avenue. Now, I came from a different part of Brooklyn that I'm living in now, called Brownsville, which is probably the other side of the earth from 77th Street and Madison Avenue. So I remember this gallery was on the second floor, and you had to know where it was. It wasn't just something you walked into. It wasn't on street level. It was like for certain people in the know, you went there. Anyway, I decided to go there. I walked in off the street, no introduction, nothing. And I had these photographs with me, and I met a man who was the assistant to George Stempfli, whose name is Philip Bruno. And I said to him that 5 years before, I had visited the gallery and seen a wonderful exhibit of Antonio Lopez Garcia. And I thought that he would find my work of interest, that there was some connection that my work had with this artist. So my first shot of good luck was that the assistant decided to look at my photographs, because the assistant's job was to get rid of anyone who wants to approach them, to get rid of them completely, as if he was guarding a moat. So he looked through my photographs and he said that he would like to show these to George, the owner of the gallery. So that was my second piece of good luck. Then I received a phone call saying that they would like to come from their gallery to visit me in Brooklyn. That was my third piece of good luck. And they decided to come. So first they came to an apartment that we had, which was near where I live now on Fisk Place. It's a 1-block street. Now, Park Slope wasn't Park Slope what it is today. It was kind of a mixed area, a little skittish, but mixed, not well-to-do, mixed. And my thought was that they had been, per the year, they had spent more time in Paris than in Brooklyn, and that Paris was more familiar to them than Brooklyn, and they probably had never been to Brooklyn. So that was my thought. I never got that confirmed, but in any case, that's what I thought. So they came to see some work that I had in my apartment. Then we went to my studio, which was in an even more working class area than Park Slope was. So Sunset Park at that time was low-level factories, low-level industry, some working class elements, very simple area. And my studio was above a place that fixed springs on cars. So these two gentlemen, who were both taller than me and very well dressed, came. We all went, the three of us went to my studio. And there in my studio was, as I said, this painting, the left and right side drawn out, the middle in process, and about 3/4, 2/3 finished. So the two of them, now I did not understand that just them coming was another stroke of good luck. So then they looked at my painting without saying a word for the next half hour. And then the owner of the gallery took out a little black cigar, very fancy little black cigar, lit it up and started smoking. And he then said one sentence to me after a half hour. And the sentence was very simple. He said, I think that's a great painting and I'd like to own it. So I am a very worked up kind of person, very excitable, really almost couldn't contain myself. I said, what can I do? How can I help, et cetera, et cetera. And he put on his coat, his assistant or co-director put on his coat. They walked downstairs to 4th Avenue. I trailed behind them. At 4th Avenue and 25th Street, they hailed a cab. And there I was standing there. And the assistant came out and said to me, don't call us, we'll get in touch with you. I went over to a phone booth, which was outside the Atomic Spring Works, and called my beautiful wife and explained the whole thing that had taken place. I said, this is the craziest thing that I've ever heard of. I wonder what's going to happen. And I said, is this some kind of joke? And 3 or 4 days went by, nothing, I don't hear anything. I get a letter from the gallery dealer. Very well written letter. And he writes to me in very beautiful prose. He says to me, Philip Bruno and I were very impressed with your work, especially the large unfinished triptych. We propose to buy this painting in its unfinished state and pay you this amount of money per month for the next 2 years. Anyway, so I think that what I'm saying, I'm not saying it for myself, but I'm saying it because of the thing about seeing this artist's work in the New York Times and being drawn to it. And you can never tell what will happen. It's like magical. And had I not seen the artist's work, I would have never, ever even thought of going to this gallery or looking at the gallery. I never even knew about it. And there I was being supported for 2 years. Anyway, I'll see you next week, okay?
Great story.
Thank you, thank you.
But
Rita, thanks.
Did you,
Thank you.
Yeah, good story.
but you didn't sell it to him. You didn't sell it to him, did you? Or did you?
Well, he ended up buying it because he paid for it, but he paid for something that was not finished. For
Yeah,
those of you who don't quite understand this, 99.99% of what galleries do is they pay you after you sell something. Okay, they don't pay it first. They pay you after they sell something.
Someone else.
Okay, and so this was exceptional at a particularly important period of time for me. And it was kind of like the gods were saying, you were doing the right thing. You were in the right direction. The gods sent a message to me. If you believe in that, that I think that's what it meant. And it was extraordinarily lucky. You couldn't, it was like 10 million to 1 that someone would do that. But it started with the seeing the painting, the sculpture in the New York Times. So my connection with this artist is not just the artist, but it is something about the journey in my own life. So I thought you would like to know it, but I don't want you to feel that it's like tooting my own horn. It's really amazing. I mean, it's like, that's what I feel. It's amazing. This was a great class, very stirring, very.
If I may say something, Simon.
Sure.
I think if there was a movie based on, especially a documentary, on this particular story that you just recounted, it would have been a lot more interesting than The Son of the Quince Tree. Just has so much going for it.
I only hope you're right, Lucia.
No, I know I'm right.
And I hope that movie appears at some point before I visit the next world. But I really meant this, that putting this together about this artist, I started to take notes and think about it. This is the notes I take. It's like on a 4x5 index card. But in thinking about it, it got very emotional because it made me feel about luck and vibrations in someone's life, and about if you listen hard, if you really listen, you can feel this. And of course, sometimes you make a mistake. You listen to the wrong thing, or you follow the wrong directions or the wrong street. But if you believe in this, amazing things are possible. And it was really amazing stroke of luck. And I share it with you, and I hope you have a nice week, and thanks, Lucia. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Hearing that.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.
Good
Bye.
week.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.
Everybody.